Up first, President-elect Donald Trump rejecting the CIA's claim that Russia influenced the U.S. election in his favor. He calls that assessment, quote, ridiculous. Now, a group of key lawmakers planning a bipartisan investigation.
Trump is also angering China, but this is a very different set of politics at play. He is refusing to apologize for speaking directly to Taiwan's new leader while questioning why the U.S. even needs to adhere to a one-China policy. Officials in Beijing firing back in an editorial in a mouthpiece media organization saying that Trump is operating with the intelligence of an ignorant child. Just 39 days to go before the inauguration. We have every angle covered. Let's start with Jason Carroll live from Trump Tower in Manhattan. Good morning, Jason.
And good morning to you, Chris. You know, the Chinese government has made it very clear that the one China policy is basically the bedrock between the U.S. and the United States. The president-elect, for his part, in a separate issue, also challenging U.S. intelligence, showing that Russia was behind the hacking during the election.
I think it's ridiculous. I think it's just another excuse. I don't believe it.
Fiercely attacking the credibility of the Central Intelligence Agency, the president-elect dismissing the intelligence community's assessment that Russia meddled in the election to help him win.
They have no idea if it's Russia or China. It could be somebody sitting in a bed someplace.
And claiming, without offering specifics, the analysis is politically motivated.
I think the Democrats are putting it out because they suffered one of the greatest defeats in the history of politics in this country.
But it's not just Democrats. A group of bipartisan senators are joining forces, calling for Congress to launch an in-depth probe into Russia's tampering, saying the reports should alarm every American and urging cyber attacks cannot become a partisan issue.
I think they did interfere with our elections, and I want Putin personally to pay a price.
This as speculation continues over Trump's nomination for Secretary of State. Multiple sources familiar with the transition telling CNN ExxonMobil chairman and CEO Rex Tillerson has emerged as the frontrunner.
He's much more than a business executive. I mean, he's a world-class player.
The possible nomination already sparking sharp criticism from some in the GOP establishment, concerned about Tillerson's own ties to Russia. In 2013, Tillerson was awarded Russia's top honor for foreigners, the Order of Friendship, from Russian President Vladimir Putin.
It's a matter of concern to me that he has such a close personal relationship with Vladimir Putin.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio blasting Trump's pick, tweeting, "Being a friend of Vladimir is not an attribute I am hoping for from a Secretary of State." And the president-elect again showing his willingness to challenge China, questioning whether the U.S. should keep its long-standing position that Taiwan is part of one China.
I fully understand the one China policy, but I don't know why we have to be bound by a one China policy unless we make a deal with China, having to do with other things, including trade.
And the Chinese Foreign Ministry weighing in on this particular issue, urging the president-elect and the new administration to stick to the one China policy. The president-elect, for his part, Allison, moving along with his transition, now naming a new member to his team. General John Kelly has been named to be the person to head up the Department of Homeland Security. That now becomes the third general who will be part of his administration. Allison?
Okay, we'll see if we get even more announcements today. Jason, thank you very much. 17 intelligence agencies conclude that Russia interfered in the U.S. election, but the CIA and the FBI differ on why Russia did that. So let's bring in CNN Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr to break down this conflicting information. What have you learned, Barbara?
Good morning, Allison. It all goes to the question, really, of Russian motivation, Russian intent. Right now, it looks like the CIA believes that Russia really was trying to steer the election towards Donald Trump. Why do they believe that steer was happening? That's because both Democrats and Republicans, the CIA says, got hacked by the Russians, but only Democratic data, Democratic information was released. No Republican information was released. So they come come to the conclusion that's the steer towards Donald Trump. The FBI not ready to sign up to that intent yet, but by all accounts believing that the Russians were trying to at least undermine the U.S. presidential election. One key Republican operative, Sean Spicer, the RNC communications director, spoke about all of this over the weekend.
If the CIA is so convinced of this, why won't they go on the record and say that it was, as they did with the DNC? This is, I believe that there are people within these agencies that are upset with the outcome of the election and are pushing a personal agenda. But the facts don't add up.
So the Republicans, Donald Trump as well, appearing to believe that this is all politically motivated. The intelligence community not on that page. Now we are looking at the possibility of a bipartisan congressional investigation. And of course, President Obama has already ordered his own investigation into all of this that he wants completed before he leaves office. Chris?
All right, Barbara, thank you very much. Joining us now is Wisconsin Republican Representative Sean Duffy. The congressman is a member of the Presidential Transition Executive Team. Good to see you, Congressman.
Good to see you too, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Good. So let's separate. There's some nuance going on here with this issue, with the issue of global warming. Let's see if we can separate some of this. One, do you accept the consensus of the intelligence community that Russia was involved with the hacking attempts during the 2016 election?
I don't know. I think if there's a consensus, we should see that consensus from news reports that come from the FBI and the CIA. If Russia was involved in trying to influence American elections, we should know about it, Chris. But I think it's important that we parse that with the point that I don't think Russia actually had any influence in this election. They might have tried, but they didn't have any influence. They didn't set up Hillary Clinton's email server. They didn't set up the Clinton Foundation. They didn't do her messaging. They didn't encourage her not to come to our great state of Wisconsin.
Separate question.
It is separate.
Separate question.
It is.
In October, we heard from Clapper, he is in his coordinating responsibility, saying Russia's involved with what's going on here with the hacking. They are not in question about that, and I'm sure you know this. You can get a briefing whenever you want it. They are of no two minds about that. Why Russia did it? That is a separate question. They are not done with that part of their investigation yet. And now, as you know, you've got bipartisan members on the Senate side who want to do a set of hearings of that on their own. But in terms of Russia's involvement, that does not seem to be something that we need to see more about. You seem to say differently.
Well, what I think, Chris, is that if Russia was involved again, we want to do the background investigation and fully be aware of what kind of influences they want in our election system, because we want to prevent it in the future. That is key. But I think it's important that we don't conflate this with Russia actually having an influence on the net end result of our election last November.
Right, but it's the political resistance to the second part seems to be fueling a resistance to the first part, especially by the president-elect. And it seems to be lining up people against him now. You got McCain and Schumer on the same page about wanting to investigate this because they say, hey, supporting Russia, which is what it winds up being, right? You wind up, if you don't accept the intelligence that they were meddling in our election, then you're tacitly defending them at a minimum. So now you have...
I don't think so.
Well, how not? If the intelligence community in Clapper comes out and says, Russia was behind this, and you say, I think that's ridiculous, what are you saying?
But I think what's important is what do the American people hear through the reporting? I don't think we want to conflate the two, and I want to make sure that the American people understand that Russia did not influence this election, and I think there could be a motive by some to tarnish Donald Trump.
Incredible is saying that.
But I think that we've got to be clear when we do say it, because I think when you say Russia was involved in the election, or
that's
Russia hacked, or Russia was on Donald Trump's side,
that's not the media. That's what the intel agency said.
But my point to you, though, Chris, is I think that when we talk about this, we want to be very clear to the American people that there's clear distinctions. Yes, if they were involved, how were they involved? Let's vet that. Let's investigate it. Let's find out the truth.
But I'm saying
to viewers, it's important to know.
But I'm saying you're ignoring the first part. I get you about, hey, don't say that.
No,
Russia won this for Trump.
No.
Well, I keep saying to you, Clapper came out in October. The intel agencies say that they have consensus about whether or not Russia was involved, and the answer is yes, You say, yeah, we should investigate
but Chris,
that. No, they're saying the answer is yes. You don't have to investigate that. You have to investigate to find out what their motives are and what else they might be doing. This may go back 2-3 cycles, but not, you don't know whether or not they were involved. The intel agencies say they were.
But you have a disagreement about the intent with the FBI and the CIA, and we know that sometimes the CIA is political. And what was the real intent? And were they trying to undermine American democracy, or were they trying to help Hillary Clinton? What was the intent? But again, when we talk about it exclusively, like Russia's involved in our election, and then that might lead viewers to think that, well, maybe Donald Trump wouldn't have one but for Russian involvement, and I think that's absolutely false. Again, you have to look, if Russia is so powerful and such great hackers, the best they could come up with was the Podesta emails. I mean, really, it was a little bit embarrassing for the campaign, but I mean, it didn't move anybody.
I'm just saying, again,
DNC was helping.
Congressman, you sound like you're questioning whether or not Russia was involved.
No, I'm not.
That's what it sounds like.
I ceded that point. I ceded that point the first time around.
But you just said if they were involved, the best they could come out with was the Podesta email?
We should investigate.
Seems to question that.
But I haven't heard you say, Chris, listen, there's two questions. One, what was Russia's involvement? What did they do? Let's investigate it. But I don't hear you saying, let's be crystal clear. The DNC's emails showing that the DNC partnered with Hillary Clinton to thwart the rise of Bernie Sanders, that didn't play at all in states like Wisconsin. Nobody cared. And I think we have to be clear to the American voter that Russia didn't have any involvement in the outcome of this election in states like mine that swung the race from Democrat to Republican.
I'm just saying, my job is to go on what
I want to understand.
My job is to go on what we can discern as fact, and what we know at this point is the U.S. intel agencies say Russia was involved. What they did, why they did it, that's going to require secondary and tertiary analysis. But on the first part, it seems pretty crystal coming out of them. Let me ask you about a separate issue. Tillerson and Trump seem to be like-minded. This has nothing to do with Russia or China, but on global warming. Trump just gave out some sound. Do we have it that we can play about what Trump's saying about global warming? Let me play this for you for context.
Sure.
I'm still open-minded. Nobody really knows. Look, I'm somebody that gets it. And nobody really knows. It's not something that's so hard and fast. I do know this. Other countries are eating our lunch.
And again, it's like there are two different conversations being having. You have the overwhelming consensus of the scientific community will say you do not get it, to use the president-elect's words, if you think that there is an open question as to whether or not man's actions have an influence on global warming. How much, what to do about it, are our policies good enough for us, are they too advantageous to other countries? Separate consideration. Do you believe that it is an open question as to whether or not man's actions are influencing global warming?
Well, what I'll tell you, Chris, is I think that the climate is changing, and it has always changed. And we thought back in the 70s, these same kind of folks were saying that we had the next ice age that was upon us coming in the 70s. Now, we see here the Earth is getting warmer. What I think is important when you look at this, and I live in Wisconsin, I live here, Chris, because I love the outdoors. I love to swim and kayak and ski and hike. And if you don't have clean air and clean water, you can't do any of those things. It's important to me, and it's important to my constituents. I have the largest Great Lake in my district, Lake Superior. But I think it's important that we say, what are the smart policies that can help us reduce our carbon emissions, but also make America competitive? Because if you're driving up the cost of energy and electricity in states like mine, I have poor people, they can't afford their electric bills, they can't afford to put food on their table, and so they want us to have a smart policy moving forward, but again, to make sure we're clean and we're responsible.
These are two separate things. Like I said the other day talking to Marsha Blackburn, can you be pro-clean water and clean air if you don't support the science of global warming? And the reason I said that is I accept that science. Then what are your smart policies? I don't know why you have to question the scientific consensus to want to question what the right policies are.
But Chris, the flip side of that is you can say, listen, I believe in global warming. I believe it's man-made. I believe that America is the worst actor. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the Rust Belt. I'm going to look at states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And what I need to do is I need to put all of these blue-collar workers out of a job and make sure that the jobs they do have, they don't make enough money to pay their electrical bills and their gas bills. They can't pay for their food. And so what? Then we're going to have more government programs to help more people who can't provide for themselves. What I'm telling you, Chris, is that we need to have smart policies that are clean policies, but also are moving America along as we develop new technology, so you're not having energy costs skyrocket. And as you know, manufacturing in America uses a lot of energy. And if you can take reduced energy costs, making America more competitive, it means more jobs, but also the ability to pay better wages, which are all issues that we care about. But one of the problems with Democrats is they'll say, we want to increase rules, we want to increase regulation, we want to increase wages, we want to increase the cost of health care, and we want American business to be successful and stay in America. Well, something has to give. So how do we have a common sense approach to these policies that help the American worker, but also make sure we have a clean environment? And I think you can balance those two things really effectively. But if you push it too far, like what Barack Obama was doing, all of a sudden you're regulating on my farms in America that provide milk to so many Americans, mud puddles in the ditches of their fields.
I hear you.
They can't farm anymore. And so what I talk about is balance and smart policies that can help both of those two things happen.
And let's not cheat the conversation as these ideas come up and you have to make these decisions. Let's keep having this conversation right here on New Day. As always, thank you very much, Congressman.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Have a good day.
You too. Allison.
Okay, let's get to some headlines. Boeing sealing the biggest deal between the U.S. and Iran in nearly 40 years, despite opposition, from some big-name lawmakers, including President-elect Trump. The multi-billion-dollar deal to sell 80 jets to Iran was made possible after the U.S. lifted sanctions against Iran in September. Boeing says the agreement, quote, will support tens of thousands of U.S. jobs.
An Australian graffiti artist has recreated the punch scene round the world. The zookeeper, the kangaroo has his dog. They frame up. Bing! Last week, this happened in Australia.
You still love it.
I got some heat from this from Animal. First of all, the kangaroo's fine, but it's gone viral. It's been captured in a mural now. The artist tweeting it out earlier today. No word if the zookeeper has seen it or if the kangaroo did either. What do you think?
Well, I like the action shot. So I don't know that the still frame captures it with quite the delight that the action shot does, where they show the kangaroo's stunned expression afterwards. That's your favorite part.
Do I have any more legitimacy with you now that you've seen how many other people have found this?
No, I always loved
it. At first, you thought it was me being vanilla gorilla and that I like anything that hits anything else.
Well, you do like anything that hits a kangaroo. Let's just have full disclosure.
First of all, a kangaroo is not a victim, by the way.
See, here we go. You have a lot of feelings about kangaroos.
A man who goes to save his dog and throws a punch at a kangaroo, and the way the kangaroo just... All right, anyway.
Oh, maybe we'll play that again later. Chris delights in it. So, meanwhile, back to news. The CIA and the FBI do not see eye to eye on Russia's motivation to interfere in the U.S. presidential election. Why aren't they on the same page? We're going to ask our two best intelligence experts next.